Welcome back to the channel. I'm Matt McFarland. Since I've now finished my review series on all 6 Scream movies, it's time to rank every single one of them from worst to best. Go ahead and comment your list down below. I'd love to see how you guys rank these movies. But remember, like always, if you think I should make my list the same as your list, well, you little weasel, then that wouldn't make it my list. Now would it? Anyways, if you want to see my videos on each movie individually, go and check out my Grab or Stab series on the channel, where I deep dive into the behind the scenes stuff, plot of the movie, fire off plenty of corny jokes, and because a lot of the movies have multiple Ghostface killers, I also go over who I think killed who. But before we get into the rankings, let me explain how decisions are made around this place and what factors I'll be considering when ranking each Scream movie. First, how good were the kills? Second, how good was the opening scene? Third, the characters and how they fit into the Ghostface reveal. Fourth, how fun was the movie to watch and how good was the overall premise of the movie? And lastly, how scary was it? There are a lot of things to love about the Scream franchise, like its meta, self-referential commentary, or playing plastic surgery bingo with your friends every time you know they're bringing back a legacy character. But as far as quality goes, there's no doubting Scream is probably the most consistent horror franchise. There's not a single movie on this list that stands out as a bad one. When the first Scream came out, it completely revitalized the genre, which at the time was getting a little iffy.
Enough with this Michael Myers bullshit!
But Scream made the genre mainstream cool. It was a horror movie made for horror fans and really leans into the subtleties within horror movies that an audience can recognize. The wittiness and the cleverness in Scream is something we had never seen before in the genre. Also, what makes Scream a little bit unique in a way is that Ghostface is kind of like the Batman of horror. Besides being a bad guy and all that, there's no supernatural abilities or magic or anything like that. No special powers, just kicking ass with a suit and a knife. But without further delay, let's pull out those voice changers and get into my personal rankings of the Scream franchise from worst to best. Coming in last place is Scream 3, released in 2000. Scream 3 takes place 3 years after the second movie, and this time around takes place in Hollywood. Essentially, in this one, Sidney's hiding away in the California mountains, but then gets pulled out of hiding when Ghostface starts killing off the cast of Stab 3. Scream 3 has typically always been universally recognized as the worst Scream movie, but I feel like it's been kind of propped up recently on social media and YouTube and stuff. I've been seeing so many people say they actually love it now after shitting on it for so many years, which is kind of weird. I know it's kind of cliche to put Scream 3 here, and again, it's not a bad movie, but if you go back and watch the entire franchise like I have a hard time telling myself it's not the worst in the franchise unless you really prefer your Scream movies to be mostly just silly and kind of ridiculous. I think Scream 3 is a good time. It does lean into the self-awareness, and I actually don't mind the Hollywood setting. I think that's kind of even more meta if you think about it. But Scream 3 was the first movie up to this point not written by Kevin Williamson, and still to this day is the least gory in the franchise, which was mainly because of the Columbine shooting that happened during the early stages of development, which heightened the controversy surrounding whether or not media violence was to blame. So they switched up the entire plot of the movie, which actually was originally supposed to have Macher making a return. I think the opening to Scream 3 is also one of the weakest in the franchise. It's nowhere near as tense as some of the other openings, even though it does kill off a pretty important character from the first 2 movies. The third Scream also has the infamous Ghostface voice changer shit, which in my opinion is just lazy writing. It basically allows Ghostface to just manipulate and make people go anywhere he wants whenever he wants. What are they gonna do next? Just have 3 Ghostface killers running around? Oh wait. Scream notoriously also likes to add some great new characters in each movie, but the new additions in Scream 3 were not necessarily bad, but I think are some of the weakest and the least witty characters in the franchise. I also think it's one of the weaker Ghostface reveals. Roman's whole vendetta against Sidney, claiming she stole his life from him, is a little bit weak to me. It also doesn't really make sense that Roman worked his entire life to finally get a directing gig, which happened to be on a movie about the murder of his mother. All this just to try and kill his sister? Seems like there's easier ways to go about doing that. Then on top of that, the reveal tries to undercut the entire Billy and Stu reveal from the first movie by saying they were just Roman's little puppets. Come on, don't give me that bullshit. Scream 3 is also, in my opinion, the least scary movie in the franchise, and overall just such a weird tone for the franchise. But again, not a bad movie, but it does sit in last place for me. Coming in at number 5 is Scream 5, which takes place 25 years after the original Woodsboro Massacre and is the first movie that's not directed by Wes Craven. After an almost 11-year break between the 4th and the 5th movie, the direction for Scream 5 essentially was to relaunch the series with a baton pass from the legacy cast to the new characters. The tone of Scream 5 is intentionally very similar to the original. I like that they brought the ending back to Stu's house. That was a cool little touch. You could also argue this is one of the scariest and most intense screams in the franchise. Scream 5 also has some pretty damn solid kills, even though for the first time nobody died in the opening. I did enjoy the opening though, I thought it was solid. I also thought this older, more gruff Dewey was one of his best versions in the franchise. I mean, the man's been through some shit. I also think Ghostface is pretty badass in this movie. There's a ton of cool little Easter eggs throughout the movie. But guys, Dewey's death was so bad. They just made Dewey look like a complete moron. He does this over-dramatic walk towards Ghostface while reloading his gun. Then right as he's about to execute Ghostface, his phone rings, which gives Ghostface just enough time to go in for the kill shot. I know some people think this might end up being revealed in Scream 7 as Stu killing Dewey here, but if that doesn't happen, you're also trying to tell me here that Amber did that to him? Normally, I wouldn't really care too much about this kind of thing, but this is Dewey. You've tried so hard to keep him alive for 5 movies and he just goes out like that? It's one of those where the first time I saw it, I out loud said, wow, that is stupid. Also, the way Sidney was incorporated into the story felt kind of thrown in, like they clearly could only get her to do it if she didn't have to film a bunch of stuff. This is also, in my opinion, the worst Gale in the franchise. The movie spends way too much time focusing on the whole Gale-Dewey breakup, but we really didn't want a breakup thing. And obviously, the new cast has huge shoes to fill, and no matter what, there will always be a piece of the fans that will never let them take over that baton completely. But outside of maybe Jenna Ortega, the characters were kind of forgettable, which I don't think was really their fault necessarily. I think it was more so just how they were written. I didn't, but I know a lot of people correctly guessed the Richie reveal early on and thought it was kind of obvious, but I thought Richie did a good job throughout the movie. I liked his character, but I thought the entire "we met on a stab" subreddit thing with Amber just felt kind of lazy to me, kind of too much like Scream 2, but Scream 5 is fun, had some good kills, and is definitely pretty tense at times, but regardless, it still sits at number 5 in the franchise for me. At number 4, I've got Scream 4, which came out in 2011. Scream 4 gives us the return of Sidney to Woodsboro after being away for 10 years. The franchise took an 11-year break after Scream 3, and Wes Craven this time really had to figure out a way to appease this new generation of horror fans while also keeping the fans of the original happy, which I'd imagine is pretty damn hard to do because horror had changed so much during that time span. In Scream 4, we get to see a lot of things that were new to the franchise. Found footage was now a big part of the genre, so they incorporated that a little bit, and horror had never been gorier. So there's definitely some blood in this one, which is way different than Scream 3. A lot of people consider the triple opening to Scream 4 their least favorite in the franchise, and I'd still probably say I like it more than Scream 3's opening. I definitely didn't hate it, but it is one of the weaker openings in the franchise for sure. Scream 4 gives us the highest body count in the franchise up to this point, and I thought Perkins' death was hilarious when he got stabbed in the forehead, then walked around and said "fuck Bruce Willis" right before he died. I like the new additions to the cast in this one, primarily Hayden Panettiere's character, who was really into scary movies, which was cool. Though kind of weird they introduced this entire new cast, but then killed all of them off. Well, except Kirby, of course, because we see her come back in 6. To me, the cast definitely had the youngest vibe to it in the franchise, but I thought Wes Craven did do a really good job blending the new characters with the legacy cast. I actually didn't hate Jill's reveal at the end, and I thought Charlie was kind of cool, a little homage to Randy's character. I also like Jill as one of the killers. I thought she did a good job. Her monologue at the end explaining the motive and how she's going to pull it off was entertaining. Scream 4 is a pretty damn dark movie at times, but it isn't really that scary, gritty, or shocking as the original per se, but did have some solid jump scares. Though I don't like the movie's look, like it was rubbed in Vaseline, that wasn't great, but it didn't bother me too much. Also, Sidney in this one is probably the least badass she's been up to that point in the franchise in 2011, which was kind of a downer. But I'm a sucker for horror movies during this time period. We had good kills, Haas and Perkins were nice additions to the franchise, and I like the end how Jill's plan actually did almost work. So there you go, Wes Craven's last Scream movie, Scream 4, coming in at number 4. All right, top 3 coming in hot. Slicing its way right into that number 3 spot is the newest movie in the franchise, Scream 6, which takes place 1 year after Scream 5, and we get to see Ghostface in a whole new setting, this time in New York. I want to first talk about the opening to Scream 6 for a minute. It's so damn good. First of all, Samara Weaving plays her role perfectly, this film professor who's waiting for a blind date and is really nervous. Then right after Ghostface says, "Now I see red," and then slashes her, but then the movie doesn't cut to the title like we've seen for 5 straight movies, I was just like, what is about to happen? Then the killer takes off the mask and reveals who he is, and you immediately are like, damn, we're in for something different here. And holy shit, we kind of get 5 Ghostfaces in this movie? Like, damn, that's crazy. But I will say there are definitely some glaring holes in Scream 6 though. Like basically any scene with Kirby and Detective Wayne together felt like a bad afternoon episode of Law & Order. Chad had some really frustrating moments at times too when he kept passing up opportunities to finally finish off Ghostface. The guy next door, Danny, was terrible throughout the entire movie. He had some really weird dialogue and had some scenes where you just want to scream at the TV because his character was so stupid. Like when he saw Ghostface in the girl's apartment next door and then just sits there for like the next 15 minutes screaming at the window. He doesn't throw anything. He doesn't really try to call the police, I assume, and he doesn't even run over to come and help. It's one guy without a gun. I'm pretty sure 2 strong-ass dudes and 4 girls could handle this. Also, Gale's little fuck buddy getting thrown around and slaughtered by Quinn? That kind of made no sense. Also, why is none of the core 4 armed at all throughout the entire movie? I know the Ghostface reveal is tipping its cap to Scream 2, but I didn't like the reveal that much. I think it's up there with Romans and 3 as one of the worst. I was also kind of hoping they would have been bold enough to kill off a main character in this one, which they didn't. I know I just listed off a lot of things wrong with this movie, but that's the crazy thing about this movie, is even though it has so many issues, that the other parts of the movie are just so damn good that it catapults this movie to number 3 in the franchise for me. There are so many things this movie does well. The characters, or the core 4 we call them now, are really good in this one and much better than in 5. In 5, Jenna Ortega's character spent a lot of time in a hospital bed, but was way more of a focal point in this movie, which was great because she fucking rocks. Apparently Melissa Barrera was hurt by some of the things she heard about her performance in 5. This time though, the directors and basically every cast member said there was a different energy in the air from her in this one. They've said Melissa really wanted to prove something in this one, and she did. I personally thought her character in 5 was a little bit forgettable. Not necessarily her fault, but she was fucking great in Scream 6. All of the core 4 were pretty damn solid. Chad crushed it. That made the character really likable in this one. I think the Mindy let's explain the rules stuff is a little bit overdone at this point, 6 movies in, but I really liked Mindy in this one too. The new setting in New York was solid. The weathered Ghostface mask in this one is sick. I also thought it was badass how they incorporated the previous masks by having Ghostface leave one of them after each kill. Seeing the 2 Ghostfaces attack at the same time was so damn cool. I may have even given a little old face when they both stood up and did that little knife thing at the same time. You could also argue this is the most intense movie since the original. The convenience store scene was super intense and reminded me of the kitchen scene in Jurassic Park with the raptors. The ladder scene was also really suspenseful. Also, Gale was much better in this one than in 5. Her apartment scene with Ghostface was tense and well choreographed, even though she should have just obviously stayed in the bedroom with the gun until the cops came. It's also kind of hard to believe, but we get the first ever phone call between Ghostface and Gale in this one. Ghostface in 6 is probably the angriest and most physical Ghostface in the entire franchise, and the least clumsy as well. It's like as if Steven Seagal and Jean-Claude Van Damme had a little ponytailed little baby together. Let's talk about the plot armor argument for a second, which is going all around YouTube and social media, which people are thoroughly enjoying whining about. To which I respond with, you're watching a goddamn movie. If you want the news, go bend your satellite dish back into the laser beam of the spaceship up there and turn on CNN. The directors have kind of openly said they know it's a little ridiculous how Chad survived after being basically a Ghostface pincushion, but they chose to somewhat ignore reality for a more impactful scene. Plus, Scream's kind of always been this way. Putting aside all the stabbing survivors, like whenever someone puts on the Ghostface costume, They're instantly like the same height, and they have superhuman strength all of a sudden. This is standard Scream stuff. It obviously isn't realistic, but when has it ever been? And although Scream 6 did have some major issues for me, I really enjoyed 6, and the rewatchability of this one for me is very high. So there you go, Scream 6 coming in at number 3. In the number 2 spot is Scream 2. Scream 2 takes place 2 years after the original, and it follows the survivors of the Woodsboro Massacre at Windsor College in Ohio. We get introduced to the stab movies for the first time, and Ghostface this go-around is taking notes from Gale Weathers' new book about the killings. Obviously, Scream 2 had massive shoes to fill after Scream 1. Scream 1 essentially just recharged the entire genre forever. After Scream 1, the cool actors wanted to be a part of the franchise, and Scream 1 really just made horror more mainstream. And although Scream 2 has one of the more kind of average intros in the franchise, in my opinion, Scream 2 is a damn good time. It's essentially just more of Scream 1, but on a college campus. I enjoy the college campus setting. Also, the new cast members they introduced in Scream 2 are really, really good. Like Jada Pinkett Smith, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Timothy Olyphant, Jerry O'Connell, and there's a few more. Also, it's the last movie with Randy, who's one of the most popular characters in the franchise. I bet if you hooked up Wes Craven to a lie detector test when he was alive, I bet he would have kind of regretted killing Randy off. They probably should have killed off Dewey instead of Randy, honestly. It's just my opinion, but imagine how dope Scream 3 would have been with Randy running around in Hollywood with everyone else. Also, Scream 2 might have the best version of Sidney in the franchise. After what happened in Scream 1, she's even more badass this time around and is 2 steps ahead of Ghostface for a lot of the movie. She basically trusts nobody and is willing to kill if she has to in this one. I know they had to change up the Ghostface reveal several times because of script leaks and whatnot, but in the end, I did like the reveal of Mrs. Voorhees and Mickey. I think Laurie Metcalf did a great job playing that Pamela Voorhees type of a role. I also think this movie has some solid jump scares and might be the most tense Scream in the franchise right after the first. Kind of neck and neck up there with Scream 6 to me in that category. There are definitely some questionable character choices though, like the car scene where Sidney and Hallie are trying to sneak out while Ghostface is knocked out right next to him, which kind of reminds me of a lot of stuff we see in Scream 6. Like, why the hell are you not at least taking off the mask? Let alone maybe even just killing Ghostface finally when you have a clear opportunity? I do think because Scream 2 is so similar to the original that there are a few moments that do seem a little bit repetitive at times. Also, I do think the 2-hour runtime of the movie was a little bit long. Scream 2, though, does have more kills than the original, but the kills overall aren't really as intense as the original, I would say. But the second movie does do a great job maintaining the humor, the wittiness, and the intensity from the original for the most part. It also ages pretty damn well. I saw it in the theater again recently for the 25th anniversary, and it still plays great in a theater setting. So there you go, Scream 2 at number 2. Not surprisingly, I have the original Scream in the first spot. Still 6 movies later, this movie stands as by far the best. Not just because it was the first of its kind in so many different ways, but in my opinion, still the best Ghostface reveal, the best and most shocking opening sequence in the franchise. But not just that, it's one of the best openings to any movie I've ever seen. When Scream came out, people were just so shocked they killed off Drew Barrymore right away. And although the kills in the original Scream definitely aren't the most creative kills in the world, the chase sequences and the kill sequences squeeze your ass so tight. Also, the characters throughout the entire franchise are really good, but I still think the original Scream's cast stands out above all of them. It's the best Gale Weathers in the franchise, and this is easily one of the best Sidneys in the franchise. Sidney's character is just such that perfect blend of a final girl who's smart, likable, vulnerable, and a badass at the same time. Also, I have to mention the impact the first Scream had on the genre. Obviously changing the genre forever and giving us so many years of damn good horror movies inspired by Scream. I know the Scream influence on the horror genre isn't really everyone's cup of tea, but I like it. I like what it's done for the genre. After the original Scream, horror movies became funny and kind of more mainstream, like I mentioned. Also, the original Scream is pretty damn scary at times. I mean, Jesus, that opening? You get both Steve and Casey gutted, then Casey gets hung for her parents to find her moments later. Of course, Scream is also not about supernatural things, more about like the hidden killer next door, which can be very scary for a lot of people. But the original is just so damn tense at times, but also really witty and funny at the same time. Roger Jackson, who does the voice for Ghostface, I think this is the best Roger Jackson performance in the franchise. And because most of the cast had never even met him and they kept him separate from the set, the actors were genuinely fucking horrified of the guy's voice. The original Scream also gave us a chance to see actors you would never normally see in horror movies be in a horror movie. Marco Beltrami's music is great, and it's also an amazing 90s time capsule, which brings me back every time I watch it. It's definitely a cozy movie for me that brings back a lot of memories. The first Scream is just so damn good and ages really well. The rewatchability of the original Scream is 10 out of 10 for me. It's a movie I regularly go back and watch. So there you go, Scream 1 coming in at the #1 spot. And there you go, that's my personal ranking of the entire Scream franchise from worst to best. Let me know in the comments down below what other franchises you would like to see me rank next. In the meantime though, I'm Matt McFarland, and you just finished watching Mad Blood.